Let's take apart the Nintendo Joycons. Alright, no nonsense. Let's take these things apart. To do that, I'm going to use a small nail file, a 0 Phillips head screwdriver, a size 00 tri-wing head screwdriver, and a pair of tweezers. We're going to use our size 00 tri-wing bit to remove these 4 screws. How's everybody doing? Listen, if you want something a little bit slower, I do have a slower, more detailed version of this. This video is to explain this whole process in about 5 minutes. Even though the video is about 7 minutes, it should only take you about 5 minutes to get through what you need to know in this video. We're going to use our thin file here, and we're going to gently pry apart the back off of the controller now that we have the screws removed. Do be careful because there are some ribbon cables under here that are connecting some buttons to the motherboard of the controller in here. So we're going to very gently pull this thing apart, and you can see there are 2 ribbon cables here. We're going to set this face down and flip it over, and the next part that I'm going to remove here, just to show you that it can be done, is the LED PCB controller board here. We're going to use our Phillips head screw bit. From this point on in the controller, we're using our Phillips head. So we're going to remove these screws here. Make sure to put these screws somewhere safe. You would want to remove this if you're trying to like recolor the LEDs or something like that. If you're not doing that, you can just remove this screw right here and it will pop off this whole thing. Your SL and SR buttons will also be in here. So if you don't need to remove those, you don't have to. You can just pop it off of the controller at this part here. Now we're going to remove the power cable to the rumbler. I'm using a pair of tweezers to do that, to get good and close, and then pull it right up, straight up out of the port. And then I'm also going to remove the battery connection right here as well. It's a slightly different connection, but they'll both come up using the tweezers. I'm also going to use my thin nail file here to get underneath of the battery because there is some adhesive holding it to the battery cradle. I'm just going to pry it forward using very little force, and it comes right off. Next we have 3 screws that are holding in the battery cradle, as I mentioned. That's what I like to call these things, the battery cradle. I don't know why, it just seems appropriate. We can now pull this away very gently. You're just going to flip it over. Don't pull out and pull up, just flip it over because there's a ribbon cable that's connecting the trigger button to the motherboard here. And that is held in with a lock mechanism, which is basically just a piece of plastic flap here, and we're going to lift that up, and then we can remove the ribbon cable. All of the ribbon cables pretty much have a connection like this, basically on any electronics. Using tweezers to pull it out gives you a little bit more control. Really, you really do want to use tweezers because these things are awfully small. It looks much bigger here on screen than it really is, so don't be fooled by that. This is all very small pieces. I'm now removing the joystick from the controller. These are golden screws, and I've noticed that the golden screws seem to hold in hardware and cradles, things like that, while the silver screws hold in like the motherboard and other PCB bits and that kind of thing. That was the rumbler that I had just peeled off, and now we're going to use the Phillips head screwdriver again to remove the final 2 screws that are holding the motherboard into place. We're going to flip it over inside the cradle here, and there's a ribbon cable here. I'm using that thin file to remove that as well. This is holding in our IR sensor, and then this piece here is also held down by some adhesive. I'm not using any force there, I'm just gently prying it, and eventually it just pops open. Now that everything's disconnected, I'm going to go ahead and remove the trigger button here, just pulling up on it. And be careful because there are 2 tiny springs underneath of this we don't want to lose. everything that I just told you absolutely applies to the opposite controller as well. This is the left-handed one on this side here. So what we're doing is just exactly what we did on the right side. There's only a few differences, mostly being the IR sensor isn't on this controller, and there's a few different placements of everything, but generally everything is the same. On the joystick there is a ribbon cable that you need to be mindful of that covers over one of the screws to get that loose. I'm also on this, I'm just not disconnecting really the rumbler or the battery from the motherboard either, because I'm just taking this and swapping it over into another controller shell. So I was trying to avoid doing unnecessary work. However, I have shown you everything that you need to take it apart. This is the shell that I ended up transferring it into. I did a whole shell swap with the controllers. You can see the front plate of the dock there, and then on the back of the Nintendo Switch console itself, like where the screen is, just a whole makeover of this thing. And if you want to learn how to do those things, I am showing all of that. I'm showing the reassembly part of this video will be in the controller swap video. This video is just strictly to show you how to disassemble it. And don't forget, if you need to see a more detailed video, a little bit longer, a little bit slower, there is that video available for you. Top right hand corner of your screen, go ahead and click it and you'll see the longer version there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.